Welcome everyone to the Salem State Friends of the School of Social Work program. My name is Melissa Moore and I'm the president of the Friends of the School of Social Work. The Friends of the School of Social Work is an alumni affinity group. We support not only the alumni, but also the current students in the Friends of the School of Social Work, both undergraduate and graduate. So right now things are a little dormant and quiet, but typically we do have host the Social Worker of the Year program and a couple of CEUs every year. So if you're interested in joining us, please let Jenny know and she'll be more than happy to take your information. And thank you so much for coming, guys. Have a great time.
Thank you, Melissa. I'm Yvonne Ruiz. I am the moderator for today's program, and I have been on the faculty at the School of Social Work. This is my 15th year, I believe, and I'm currently the chairperson of the School of Social Work. I want to give a big thank you to the friends who have organized this program and have been very involved in the work of the school. I'm going to introduce our panelists. So Dr. Phil Amado, Phil, you might want to wave, is an associate professor at the School of Social Work. He received his M.S.W. and PhD from Boston College Graduate School of Social Work. He has been at Salem State University since 2005. He has practiced at McLean Hospital in Belmont, Massachusetts, in a variety of roles, including as an inpatient and outpatient social worker. He has served as the M.S.W. program's field education coordinator and as the M.S.W. program coordinator. Dr. Amado's areas of research interests are in mental health and the psychological and physical well-being of boys and men. Thank you, Dr. Amado. Next is Fran Kuhn, LICSW. He has been teaching graduate social work students since 2007. He joined the faculty at the Salem State School of Social Work in January 2020, following a 19-year career as a school social worker in the Brookline Public Schools. At Brookline, he developed a grant-funded, mindfulness-based stress resilience curriculum. His professional interests include school culture and climate, school mental health, cognitive behavior therapy, and multicultural CBT practices. He is also a diplomat in the Academy of Cognitive Therapy, and we are very lucky to have Mr. Kuhn on our faculty. Next up is Dr. Monica Licey. She is a graduate of the Virginia Commonwealth University School of Social Work. She has served as the M.S.W. program coordinator and as the interim dean of the School of Graduate Studies here at Salem. Her fellowships include the National Institute of Health and the National Library of Medicine Ruth L. Kirstein National Research Award. A believer that social workers are change agents, Dr. Licey's social justice focus informs the work that she does, both in and out of the classroom. Her two major areas of scholarship include social work education and social work administration. Dr. Licey is co-chair for Voices Against Injustice and is an associate editor for the online journal Reflections, Narratives of Professional Helping. Thank you to all our panelists. With that, I am going to turn it over to Fran Kuhn, who is going to introduce a mindfulness exercise.
Hi, everybody. It's a real pleasure to be here virtually with you all. And I thought at a panel presentation on self-care for social workers that we should probably start with a little bit of self-care. And social workers are really, really good at taking care of other people, but sometimes we're not so good at taking care of ourselves. So we thought we'd start this presentation tonight with just a few moments to arrive. And I say this because we spend most of our days shuffling from one place to another, one responsibility to another. And we don't really give ourselves very many opportunities to arrive. And so this is an invitation, no expectation whatsoever for you to participate in this. But if you so choose, I'd love for you to, wherever you are, if you're lying in bed or sitting on your couch, to adopt a posture that feels comfortable and relatively upright for you, but not necessarily rigid. We're not trying to win the posture wars here. And to, if you feel inclined, to put one hand over your heart and the other hand over your belly, and give yourself the opportunity to take 3 long, nutritious, delicious breaths. And I'll go ahead and do it with you. And if you breathe along in this way, I want you to see if you can notice just what it feels like to be sitting in your seat as you are right now. Noticing the sensation of your feet, maybe in your socks or your slippers or your shoes. Most of us are wearing slippers these days. Allow yourself to notice the contact points where your body meets the chair, and give yourself another long, deep breath. As you exhale, see if you can feel yourself sink into the chair a little bit, giving yourself a moment to relax, a moment to be right here and right now. You're not anywhere else, but right here and right now. One last long, nutritious, delicious breath. And you've arrived. Thanks, everybody. I'm
Hello,
gonna,
folks.
yeah, next up to speak is Dr. Phil Amado.
Great. Thank you, Fran. And thank you for that exercise. I feel a little more relaxed. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what burnout is. Okay. So I love this picture. It's called The Scream. And it kind of puts into perspective what it's like sometimes to feel burned out. Okay. So let's start by talking about what is burnout. So the World Health Organization defines burnout as a syndrome, and it's resulting from chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed and is characterized by three dimensions. So feelings of energy depletion or exhaustion. Okay, now some of these things may sound familiar. You may have seen them in yourselves or other people. Increased mental distance from one's job, or feelings of negativism or cynicism related to one's job, and reduced professional efficacy. Okay, so that's kind of a fancy schmancy definition of burnout. Well, the one I like is burnout is a state of emotional, physical, spiritual, and mental exhaustion caused by excessive and prolonged stress. It occurs when you feel overwhelmed, emotionally drained, and unable to meet constant demands. So now that we kind of get a sense of what it is that we're looking at, we're going to talk a little bit about job burnout, because a lot of us, especially today, are under a lot of pressure to feel good about what we do and to help other people. And sometimes it doesn't always work out that way. So job burnout it's a special type of work-related stress, a state of physical or emotional exhaustion, and it involves a sense of reduced accomplishment and loss of personal identity. So it isn't a medical diagnosis, okay? But some of the symptoms of job burnout are you become, and again, this may be familiar to some of you, or to people that you've seen in the field or work with, I know it's familiar to me sometimes. So you become cynical or critical at work, and you drag yourself to work and have trouble getting started. You become irritable or impatient with coworkers, customers, or clients. There's a lack of energy. There's difficulty in concentration. There's a lack of satisfaction from what it is that you do, from your achievements. You tend to feel disillusioned about your job. And then there's also the use of food, drugs, or alcohol to feel better or to simply not feel at all, to be numb. And then your sleep habits change. And then you may have unexplained headaches, stomach or bowel problems, or other physical complaints. Okay, so what are some of the causes of job burnout? Some people are going to talk a little bit about this, but I think it's important to know what some of those things are. So a lot of times it's a lack of control, the inability to influence decisions that affect your job. People sometimes feel powerless. Okay. There are unclear job expectations. So today we're asked to do a lot more with our job. So it's unclear as to where your job ends and someone else's begins. There can be dysfunction in workplace dynamics. Okay, I think it's safe to say that we've all worked in places where, you know, there's drama that goes on. Okay, and sometimes that drama just becomes a little bit too much. There tends to be extremes of activity. Things become, when your job becomes monotonous or chaotic, you need constant energy to remain focused. There's a lack of social support. Okay, so people end up feeling isolated, especially today when a lot of people are working from home. I know a lot of social workers that are working from their home, including myself. I've been in front of this, my computer screen here since 9:30 this morning. So I feel a little burnt out right now, but Fran certainly helped me with that, feel more grounded. And then there's work-life imbalance. Okay, so you work too much, in other words. So there are some risk factors. Okay, and I think these are important to think about. You know, what are these risk factors? So you identify so strongly with work that you lack balance between your work life and your personal life. So that talks about work-life imbalance. You have a high workload, including overtime work. So in other words, work consumes you. You try to be everything to everyone. Okay, and as a social worker, we get into this field because we want to help people. But a lot of times we end up giving a lot of ourselves, and that becomes problematic. You work in the helping professions such as healthcare, which we do, and then you feel you have little or no control over your work, and your job is monotonous. In other words, you're doing the same thing all the time. So what are some of the consequences? You know, what ends up happening? So you can have excessive stress, fatigue, insomnia, sadness, anger, irritability. There can be alcohol or substance misuse. Sometimes it can lead to heart disease, high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, and vulnerability to certain illnesses. If your stress is really high and your immune system is depleted, that can lead to different vulnerabilities. So what do our colleagues say? What do some social workers say about when they feel burnt out? So one person says, I feel constantly depleted. Another one said, I'm drained physically and mentally all the time. And another one finally says, I just don't care anymore. I have been drained of my compassion. That's very sad to think of someone that's at that point. But I think what's going to happen is Fran is going to now talk to you about sort of a different way of looking at burnout and looking at wellness. So Fran, I turn it back over to you.
Right, if we could advance the slide one more, that'd be great. What I want to talk about that is, it's similar to burnout, but I think captures the experience of what it's like to be a social worker a little bit more. It's a concept that's called moral injury. What we know is that social work is a values-based profession. We didn't get into this so we could move widgets around or fill out Excel spreadsheets. That's not really the sort of work that we do. We work on behalf of people, often marginalized people, who really need our help and support. And I think especially over the last number of years, we've seen that many of these people, the populations that we care deeply about and we work on behalf of, have been targeted, have been maligned in public, and that the policies that have been created to the impact of policies that have been created have had a differential impact on the communities that we care so much about. So moral injury is the idea that there are things that are really, really important to us as social workers in our profession. And when we see those things, those principles get violated, we are injured in a deeper way than what really burnout is. These jobs are hard, we know that. Doing it in a pandemic is even harder. Doing it in a pandemic with trying to manage your own life and family at home is nearly impossible at times. But doing it in the context of all those challenges, while we see that the people in the communities that we know are the most vulnerable get treated the worst and have the worst impact of things like the pandemic and other economic and other social policies that injure them more so than for other communities and other groups of people that we have. It's a wound. It's a psychic wound that we experience as a result of watching people we care about get hurt. And that injury is something that we have to do some healing for. We have to take good care of ourselves. And we have to understand that this is not about our inability to hold on long enough. This is not about our grit. This is not, that we ran out of the energy that we need and that therefore there might be something wrong with us, or if we just did more mindful meditation or took longer walks, we'd be able to do more. No, I think the real issue here is that things that we care very deeply about are being threatened. And what that means is that we're holding a heavier weight and we're taking a heavier toll. And so the need for self-care and the need to share resources with each other, to support each other in this work is probably the greatest it's ever been. So I'm really looking forward to continuing the conversation with everybody so that we can think about ways to support all of us and each other as we engage in this really challenging work. We're going to turn it over to Monica, who have a few more words of wisdom to share.
Thank you, Fran, and for Phil for setting that up for us. If we could have the slide moved forward, Yvonne. I think, okay, so I think we're working on slides. So what I'm hoping to talk with you all about are some ways to take care of ourselves, to respond to the moral injury you may be experiencing or the burnout that you may be experiencing. And I've really thought about this kind of in three areas: our mind, our body, and our spirit. And so I'm going to talk about each of these three areas separately with some concrete examples, I hope, of some things that you can do for yourself. I've also tried to frame this within the current contexts that we are all living in. So we really do have some pretty big crises that we are navigating. There certainly is the pandemic, which has been harmful for many of us. On top of the pandemic, we have the economic crisis that has started, which I believe is going to continue and get worse. We also have what feels like a new and heightened awareness of the systemic racism within the political climate that we are all dealing with. Those are all really big, hard things by themselves. And so I've tried to be mindful that many of us are dealing with all of those things at one time, which is why I want to provide this caveat. So I'm going to say, here are some things that you can do. And I want to share with you, when I used to practice in what is now called the area of interpersonal violence, we used to tell each other to stop shoulding all over ourselves, right? I should do this, I should do that, which just adds another layer of stress and, oh my goodness, I can't do one more thing to our very long daily list of tasks to do. So while I'm going to make some suggestions, I would like you to remember to be gentle with yourself and to think carefully about what you decide you would like to work on. Because it is one of the paradoxes of self-care. We begin to treat it like it's this one more thing we have to do, and then it is self-defeating. The whole point of this is for you to remember to treat yourselves in the way that you would like to treat your clients, right? You want to be supportive and loving and caring, which might mean doing none of what I am going to suggest, and that is perfectly okay. So let's start with our mind, right? So when we talk about mind, we're really talking about our psychological and our emotional health. This is really important for us as practitioners because we need to be able to be fully present for our clients. But we also want to be fully present for ourselves and our families and our loved ones. And so what I've seen in the literature and from my own experience, one of the things that really helps is actually the way we started this conversation with you, and that is through some contemplative practices. What a contemplative practice does is it helps you develop a first-person focus. There are lots of ways to do this. You can do it through meditation or mindfulness. You can do it through prayer. You can even do this through some mind-body connection work, whether it's Tai Chi or yoga. Even weightlifting has been demonstrated as a way to connect our where we are psychologically and emotionally with what is going on in our bodies. So in order to think about how to take care of ourselves psychologically and emotionally, there are all kinds of resources out there for you. There are lots of apps. There are blogs that you can read that can help. One that I'm familiar with is called headspace.com. There are lots of mindfulness and meditation apps that you can use. Even my Fitbit has a breathing exercise that you can do for either 2 minutes or 5 minutes. So that's the mind part. And when we think about the way our mind and our body are connected, when we talked about like yoga or Tai Chi or even weightlifting, it brings us to thinking about physically taking care of ourselves. And the one thing that when I was younger, I always poo-pooed, and now as I've gotten older, realized, oh, that's really important, is sleep. There is more and more literature coming out and more rigorous research to demonstrate that sleep is incredibly important to our well-being. Even the Army right now is recommending what they call strategic napping. So, being able to take good care of your body is important so that you can do all of the physical things that you need to do. Getting a good night's sleep is the first thing. The second thing is good nutrition. Again, there are all kinds of apps and blogs that you can access to help you think about feeding your body, both literally and figuratively, right? Feeding your body good, healthy food. And then the last piece of taking care of your body really is exercise. It's movement. Exercise is connected to sleep. Exercise increases how well you're able to sleep. Exercise will also increase the quality of the sleep that you're able to get. It has also been demonstrated that exercise eases anxiety. It has been shown to mitigate depression symptomology. And it also, I've been reading more and more in, I happen to be a New York Times reader, but I've been reading more and more in the paper that exercise also seems to have some really fabulous additional bonuses from maintaining our cognitive function as we grow older. And even, I think it was Monday in the science part of the Times, there was an article based on an NIH study talking about how exercise may actually boost the body's response to cancer, right? So exercising, while it is hard sometimes to make oneself do it, I'm right there with you, really has some amazing bonuses as it connects to how we feel and how we're able to show up in the world. In terms of resources for exercises, in terms of resources for taking care of your body, because sleep is so important, I will share with you that there has been some recent research done on the benefits of using a weighted blanket. And on a night like tonight, we can all use a blanket, I think. And then again, for exercises, there's all kinds of free apps out there. There's Map My Run, Nike has a free app if you walk, and YouTube can be really, really helpful if you're interested in either Tai Chi or yoga or some of those other meditative physical activities. And then the last thing that I wanted to talk with you about is taking care of ourselves spiritually. And I'm not talking spiritually in terms of our faith tradition, although I would absolutely encourage you to use that resource if you have a faith tradition. But what I would like to posit is, as a social worker, sometimes taking care of yourself is actually doing the work that you need to do. So it is, doing the activism. It is making yourself heard. It is figuring out how to do self-care so that it doesn't end up at the bottom of that list of things you didn't get to today. It is hard to do. It is hard to make this a priority, right? And one of the reasons that it is hard to do is a thing called negativity bias. So negativity bias is this propensity that we have to pay more attention to the negative things or the bad things than we do to the positive things that we have in our life, which means that when we're trying to decide what we're going to do, we tend to think about the things that will have the negative impact more than the positive impact. One of the ways that you can respond to negativity bias is through a thing called appreciative inquiry. And appreciative inquiry is a practice of really holding on to and raising up in your life the positive aspect of almost anything. And so if you can help in a social work clinical language, this might be reframing, right? Instead of always looking at the bad part of things, the more you can focus on the good part of things, this appreciative inquiry, the more space it takes up in your head and the less space the negativity bias will take up. But I do want to emphasize that all of this is going to take work, right? So what I would recommend in terms of taking care of ourselves holistically is to recognize that taking care of yourself is work. And it needs to be attended to. It is not an indulgence. And it is very hard to make good decisions when we're tired. We also know through the research literature that willpower dissipates through the day. And so if you're not like myself, I'm not a morning person, but if you tend to be a morning person, maybe you think about how you take care of yourself first in the morning, because you know that as you go through the day and you get tired, it will become harder and harder for you to do that. And this is not a one and done situation, right? This isn't a, well, I did it, I'm done. This is an iterative process. There are times that you will be better at it than other times. Making and breaking habits take a lot of work. And because of time, I'm not going to go into all of the ways that you can make or break habits, but I will share that on the resource list that we will be sharing with you, there are some articles there about how you can do that. And the last thing that I would like to recommend is that you don't try to do this by yourself. Find a friend, a colleague, you know, kind of the buddy system as they use in the Army, right? It's always helpful to have someone help you hold yourself accountable to the things that you know are important for yourself. I would also encourage you to look into some time management / life hacks, if you will. There are some really good strategic ways of thinking about how to manage your time, even during a pandemic. And the last thing is to be gentle with yourself in your perseverance of the making and breaking of the habits you need to be the best self for yourself that you can. And so I'm going to get off my soapbox now, Yvonne, and turn it back over to you.
Thank you. That was great information from each one of you. I want to turn back to Phil and just ask a question for Phil, because you did a very good overview of what burnout is and how we might experience burnout. And I'm thinking about what we do as social workers. We work in many different types of settings. We work with different populations, but there are a lot of core tasks or skills that we use. Engagement with our clients, assessment with our clients, the direct services, or working from a community perspective. And I'm wondering a couple of things. One is, how can we be aware when burnout is starting to happen? And what is it about the work that we do? Specifically, I'm thinking about boundaries, for example, and setting limits, what we often need to do with our clients and sometimes with our colleagues. So I'm thinking about, what is it for us as social workers that we need to be aware of when there's the potential for burnout? And in the actual work that we do, is there any way that we can actually keep it at bay or have some sense of prevention while we're doing our work? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so one of the first things that comes to mind is to, and I think that Monica talked a little bit about this when she talked about doing a lot of the work with somebody else, the healing kind of work. And I think in terms of the identification work, okay, I think having a buddy, like a coworker, supervisor, partner, friend, whatever, that you can talk to, therapist, you know, that you can talk to about how you're feeling, what your level of depletion is like. Maybe do a, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, you know, 1 being like extremely depleted, 10 being, you know, 10 feeling, you know, really energized. Okay. I think it's important to share that with people and to do what I would call a gut check every so often, to be able to say, you know, how does it seem to you? You know, for example, my wife is a social worker. We talk to each other about our jobs all the time, you know, about how we're feeling and where we're at. And, you know, because we both have very demanding jobs. And I think ever since I've been on Zoom, I feel like I'm working harder than I had when I was face to face. Okay. And I think by having that person to bounce ideas and thoughts off of, I think is really important. Having a certain, you know, Fran did an exercise on mindfulness. You know, think about where you're at and how you're feeling on a daily basis. That could be meditation, it could be mindfulness, it could be prayer, it could be a lot of different things. And see what it is that you come up with, okay? What happens when you come back from vacation? Now, most of us are like, oh, I wish this vacation would never end. But a lot of people that are burned out or have this sense of burnout feel just like terror and dread. Like they don't want to return to their job. Like that's the last thing that I would want to do. So I think all those aspects are important to try to identify in yourself what it is that's going on. So a lot of times in our field, there's kind of a continuum, right? We can care too much and we can care too little. Both we know are bad. We have to find that space in the middle where we care, but aren't consumed with it or aren't completely numb to it.
And I just want to also open it up. If Fran and Monica have any comments they want to make about that?
Yeah, I'll jump in. I love, Phil, what you said about having a buddy. Of all the work that we do as social workers, we wind up worrying all the time about the clients that we're working on behalf of. We worry about how they're doing, especially now that we can't really see them in person. We worry tremendously about what's happening in their homes and in their communities because we're no longer there to be able to kind of put our hands on the situation and see what's happening. And I think one of the mantras that certainly carried me through all of my years as a school social worker was you never worry alone. And so finding somebody that you work with, a colleague, a supervisor, a friend, and to be able to share what some of your concerns and worries are so that you're not the only one that's holding on to it. And especially with colleagues, we can often get a little bit of extra support or another idea or a suggestion or at least some commiseration with just how hard this is. So it made me think of that idea, that mantra, never worry alone.
And Fran, I immediately felt the benefits of your opening exercise, just the letting go and the relaxing, just from that very brief exercise. Sorry, I don't know what happened to my video. I'm back. So I wanted to follow up with the mindfulness piece. And this is what I was thinking as you were speaking. The idea of a moral injury was new information for me, but it immediately resonated. The work that we do and the commitment that we bring to working with our clients who are often disenfranchised, vulnerable, experience discrimination and poverty and so on, can really be a vicarious trauma. And because we're trained to be reflexive, we're trained to be empathic, we feel deeply about our clients. And I don't think we're always aware of the impact on us who are doing the work. And if you could talk about the benefits of mindfulness a little bit more, especially how it promotes resilience.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, Monica shared something about how our willpower kind of erodes throughout the day. So we sort of imagine that graph kind of going from pretty high in the morning to pretty low by the time the evening comes. Well, in converse to that, we have stressors that build up throughout the day. So as the day goes on, that graph is going up in the opposite direction. And the fancy term for these stressors is called allostatic load. The idea that every stress we experience, and if you think about it, what's the first stressor that most folks have as they start their day? For me, it's the alarm clock going off. The very first moment that my day begins starts with something that feels stressful. And if you start to notice, by using some mindful practices and kind of paying attention to what's happening in the moment, you might start to notice, like, gosh, every time my alarm clock goes off, my chest tightens up a little bit. I have some negative thoughts that go through my mind, like, oh my gosh, I have to do this again, or what's this day going to be like, or I didn't get enough sleep, so how am I going to make it? And we have this sort of stress response that gets started within us that only gets added to throughout the day. So if we aren't learning how to take breaks and find places to get that load down after each subsequent stressor, it's just going to build up. So those breaks can be anything that's been mentioned before, but having the cue or the reminder to do it is really the key. So, if you're, again, going to use one of those apps, you can set it to every hour to have it tell you to remember to take a breath, notice that you're still alive, you're a human being. Or to use your Fitbit and have it remind you that you've been sitting too long. It's time to get up and stretch and do a little something. Or maybe you put in 3 or 4 hours with some really difficult clients and it's been a really tough and sad situation. What can we do? Can we put on a podcast for a little while, listen to something funny, text a friend, reach out, do something to get that load down again? So for each stress response we have, and we learn how to feel because we're now sort of trying to pay a little bit more attention to what's happening to our physical body and what's happening in our mind, what's happening in our hearts. When we notice that load is getting a little high, that's a cue to kind of come back and do a little something to take that breath and get a little bit of sense of relief. And to do that throughout the day will make the accumulation of all that stress not so intense. So we respond to stress with something that's relaxing, whatever form it takes, cat videos, chai lattes, whatever works for you, is to be able to plan to do some of those things so that you can meet the stressors that you have with something that counters that stressful response.
Yeah. It makes me feel like I need to set my my watch to remind me just to do that deep breathing every once in a while. So Monica, I think the whole list of activities and tips that you presented, I think really make a lot of sense, and not just in that mind, body, spirit connection, but I was thinking about neuroplasticity and how so many of those activities that you identified have a much larger benefit in terms of shaping and rewiring our brain. And
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I absolutely agree. And part of that rewiring and reshaping our brain can also then help us respond better to when we are feeling stressed. I know that, so as many of you may be listening are aware, I've never really spent a lot of time as a clinical social worker. Most of my social work experience has been more in management and community activity. But when I did work with our state domestic violence agency, when I lived in Virginia, when I did that work, I had some, I guess I would call them rituals, because I think rituals can be extraordinarily helpful in this. I had some rituals about when I went to work and when I went home. Interpersonal violence is tough, like many of the areas that social workers work in. And so I knew that when I left my building, I always left by the same door. And as I was leaving, I would be mentally putting files in a filing, because this is how I can get a filing cabinet in my head, and locking them. And I left the key, my virtual metaphorical key, I always left my key in the same place because it was the door I was going to walk in. And so I knew that when I left at the end of the day, it's harder to do this kind of a ritual, but I think we could be really creative, right? As we're working, many of us from home. I knew that when I left at the end of the day, I left work at work because I had small children and a family to take care of. I also knew I had to, well, I didn't really know at that point in time I had to take care of myself, but there's those kinds of rituals that we can think about. As Fran and Phil were saying, we build into our day, we build the habit of actually having conversation with a colleague, or, every second Thursday, you have, coffee before your day starts with a friend, so that you don't have to try to figure it out every day, right? You lower that cognitive load where you know it's this day, this is what I'm going to do. It makes it a little bit easier. And I do think that it helps us stay in a healthier place for ourselves.
Right. I also just want to encourage our participants to put some questions in the Q&A box, and we will get to some of the questions that you may have. And while you're doing that, I do want to ask each of our panelists, why did you want to engage in talking about self-care today? What was your interest in this and kind of your inspiration for talking about this particular topic? Phil, do you want to start?
Sure, I'll start. Number one, I think that I'm probably one of the worst people to take care of themselves. You know, I don't do the greatest job, but I'm aware of what I'm doing. You know, so there is a certain level of awareness. It's enlightened ignorance, I guess, is a way of putting it. And so I'm enlightened as to how ignorant I really am. But I think that one of the important things that we do as teachers, and I'm pretty sure that Monica and Fran are in the same situation, is we teach our students about self-care. That's one of the most important things that we can do at a very early age, because I don't know about you folks, but when I was in college, that was never talked about. It wasn't an issue. And I wanted to share an activity that I do every week that is self-care and that I think is really important to me. And maybe you guys can, take whatever you want from this example, is that I have 3 friends that were college buddies of mine. 2 of us are social workers. One is he owns a company, a business, and one is he's temporarily disabled. He's at home all the time. But we get together every week. We all live in different parts of the country, and we get together every week on Zoom, and we talk to each other, and we joke and we laugh and we poke fun at each other and just have a good time. And I think that's an important way of, number one, not isolating yourself and staying connected. And another way of people saying to you, are you okay? You know, how are you doing? You know, so we can say that to each other. And right now, especially, we're worried about our disabled friend, but we're at least trying to connect and not isolate, because this pandemic is making things very, very difficult, as folks have been saying, to isolate. You know, it's easy, especially for seniors. Seniors are out there, and a lot of people don't have computers, and they really feel isolated. So we need to take care of them, but we need to take care of ourselves first. And that's what interested me the most about being able to talk about this particular topic.
Fran?
Yeah, I'll just go ahead and say, what inspired me to participate in this is my own experience in the field, that after many years of school-based mental health work, I was really burnt out. And I wasn't doing a very good job, being a good parent and a good social worker. And I had to find something to make it work. And we've sort of co-opted mindfulness here in the West, but it's been a practice that's existed and helped people out around the world for millennia. And so when we start to engage in these practices, when we start to actually pay attention to what's happening here and now, the side effect of that is that we start to relax, because we're not spending all of our time thinking about the next thing we have to do or regretting the last thing we didn't do so well at. And so coming back to this one moment allows us to take a little bit of space and get away from what Monica shared about shooting all over ourselves, right? So if we can, so that's part of what brought me to want to share this with you. Sadly, as a result of the pandemic, not only are we losing people to COVID, we're losing a lot of people in general. And I think it has a lot to do with the stress that Phil mentioned. The stress, the isolation, the loneliness, the drumbeat of bad news every day. It takes a toll on our heart, on our functioning, on our blood pressure, on our cortisol, on our stress hormones. It wraps itself around us, and it's insidious. It's inflammation. It's all the sort of negative medical impacts that we're only really beginning to understand. But what we know is that there's something that we can do. And that's kind of the heart and soul of why we're social workers, because we look at a problem and we say, all right, what are we going to do about it? What systems have to change, what behaviors have to change, what hearts and minds have to change. And we need to apply that lens to ourselves a little bit. Say, what can I do about this guy right here to get through today, tonight, tomorrow, and next week, so that I can come back the next time, so I can do a little bit more. So I wanted to have the chance to share that and to say that to you. And I hope that each of you are contemplating some ways in which you can start to do a couple of things to work on you to help you get through this really ridiculous time.
Monica, I want to give you a chance to add anything to that.
I was interested in doing this because I generally need to be reminded. And so this was my reminder to myself. I will say, as I've gotten older, I've gotten a little bit better at it, but I figured I probably needed to hear it, so maybe I should say it.
I see we have a few questions in the chat. Thank you to our participants. So the first question is there any advice for those of us working in nursing homes or hospitals where COVID exposure is a constant stressor?
So I also actually just talked about this in my class this week. I have a couple of students who are currently working in grocery stores as they're putting themselves through their graduate programs. First, thank you very much for all of the work that you do. It's so important, and it is really hard. And the only advice that I have for you is to be gentle with yourself and know that the fact that you show up to work every day is enough. You're showing up and you do the best you can. And that is all you should ask of yourself.
It also makes me think of how vulnerable the residents of the nursing homes and hospitals also feel. And I think instead of to acknowledge the vulnerability that everyone in those settings are feeling, both the workers and the residents of those settings. I also want to echo my thanks for being on those front lines. I think it's also important to think about the systems within those settings. Are they doing all that they can to protect you, the workers? And if not, what can you ask for and use your voice? And if they are, having some gratitude and appreciation for that.
Go ahead, Fran.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you to everyone who's doing this incredibly difficult work in our nursing homes and care facilities. I'm fond of the Fred Rogers phrase, when things go wrong, look to the helpers. You're the helpers, for all those families who are so worried about their loved ones, who can't really go visit them or can't in the numbers that they used to. You can't celebrate as a big family. You can't be on the grounds. You can't be in the building. You're their heroes. So for what it's worth, find a little time and space to absorb their gratitude for you.
I'm going to move on. There are more questions in the Q&A. The next question is, what do you think of very occasionally calling out sick and taking a mental health day? Is that a good strategy, Fran?
Absolutely. Mental health is health. You're sick. You need the day. Mental health is health, right? Let's not conflate that. Let's not miss that connection. That we're somehow, because we're not hobbling around on a broken leg, that we're supposed to be able to stand up and do this difficult work every day. If you know it and you feel it, and you need it, don't just take that day, make it amazing. Lather yourself with everything that's pleasurable that you can think of, and give yourself that space. That's nutrition for your soul. I'm 100% behind that.
And I would like to add, if even when we're not in a pandemic, if you don't feel good, stay home. Like, the amount of vacation days that American workers do not take is a ridiculous number. So just stay home.
Yeah.
Take care of yourself.
Yeah. Recognize that taking a break, taking some space is part of what you need to do for yourself. And calling in sick is because you need that space. And I definitely echo what Fran and Monica have said. And I think it's sometimes hard not to feel a little guilty because we're spending that time on ourselves, but realize that's what's going to help you do your job. That's what's going to help you go in the next day and feel refreshed and feel renewed and feel like you're able to do what you need to do. So it's very worthwhile time. Phil?
I want to just piggyback on what everyone's saying. And, if you're feeling that depleted, then that's a warning sign that you need a day off and that you need to take that time off. I'm a big proponent of massages. If you can go in and get a massage, facial, I think, more power to you. That would be great.
Yeah. And the only thing I would say is don't wait until you're absolutely depleted to do that. Do it before you get to that point. There are a couple more questions. So the next question is, I support a team of social workers in an urban school system who are supporting stressed out school faculty as remote learning continues on. We are trying to emphasize self-care via mindfulness practices and many of the other suggestions that have been made by the panel. Frequent activity breaks to reduce the allostatic stress load is most helpful to think about. Thank you.
I'll just jump in on that and say, next to social workers, teachers are, just as bad, if not worse, than we are at doing that self-care. And colleagues of mine have said, like, you ever go to a conference with social workers and teachers at it? And there's like an hour-long lunch break, and the teachers like eat their lunch in 5 minutes, and then they're back at the table reading through the conference notes while everyone else is like lounging and having a luxurious lunch. So this is not what teachers know how to do. They know how to reach really hard kids. They know how to do 10,000 jobs at once, and they're not very good at slowing down. So I think one of the ideas is that we can encourage everybody to take the break and do that on their own. But if we could find them where they are, if we can build in common planning time in a school day schedule for the staff, not just across grade levels or not just across departments, but to build it in for faculty and say, all right, we're all meeting back here, at 1:15 for a 5-minute mindfulness breath session. I want to see you there on Zoom. that within the pockets of time that you can identify in your own school schedule, that you're the ones who are leading the activities for them. You're giving them that gift. You're giving them that space. So it sounds like you've got your head in the right spot. You're trying to support these teachers doing this incredibly hard work.
And it also strikes me that having them do some activities together can be very beneficial as well. Helps to break down some of that isolation and some of that over responsibility that some of us in the helping professions feel.
I also think that, especially when you're in a role of supporting people who are also doing hard work, to be kind of the ray of sunshine in the room. And I don't mean that, to give you as the social worker one more thing to do, but to really practice the appreciative inquiry perspective. To, when someone is complaining about, oh my goodness, this happened or didn't go well, to be able to counter that with, well, but here's the other side of the coin. And it's not to dismiss what someone else is saying, because they absolutely need to be heard. But I've also watched a group of colleagues just swirl themselves right into the ground, right? As each person has one more lousy thing to say, and one more lousy thing to say, and one more lousy thing to say, and one more, and you get in that pattern. And to be the person and say, yeah, I know it's really horrible, but did you notice the sun was shining today? To remember in greeting someone that instead of getting right to the work, which is a habit that I've been working on, to remember to say, hi, how are you? How was your day? How was your family? What did you do last night? Right? To be the disruptor, if you will, of all, not of all, but of, the negativity bias, I guess, is what I'm thinking.
It also sounds a little bit like cognitive restructuring techniques.
It might be, Yvonne, but I was not a clinician, and so I would not be the person to say that.
Well, cognitive reframing.
Yes.
Yeah, it is, right? It's cognitive therapy it's not the power of positive thinking, but it sure is creating enough air time and space for the good stuff to have a chance to be in the spotlight. Because of that negativity bias, we're really, really good at watching out for bad things. We're really not so good at paying attention to the good things. And so doing that is a practice that we kind of have to do on purpose. And another form of that is gratitude practice. When we think about all the anxieties that we carry around with us, even in the worst case scenarios, like somebody who's terrified of flying on an airplane because they think it's going to crash and they're going to die. Even if that did happen, which is an awful situation, if we can focus on the gratitude, I'm grateful for my career, my family, my life, the fact that I've had an impact on the world. Even if the airplane is crashing, we can find a moment to be, to be grateful for what we have. We don't have to just sit with the negative and focus on all the things that worry us and all the anxieties. So it's not ignoring some of the negative things that happen to us. It's not pretending like they're not there. It's not just, well, if I just think positively, I'll feel better. It's really giving equal airtime to the true things that are going well. Today is a beautiful day. I've reached my client after 14 attempts. I managed to get that paper in. I led a staff meeting virtually for the first time. Whatever it is, to focus on that gratitude will change your mood state pretty reliably for the good.
And there's one more question, and that is, an M.S.W student recently reflected that social work is more than a job, it's a lifestyle. That seems pertinent to this conversation. Does anyone want to comment on social work as a lifestyle, which has its benefits and it might have some disadvantages as well? Phil?
Sure, I'll comment on that. I think when we take on the identity as being a social worker, I think it becomes part of our soul, so to speak, and it really it permeates out. It comes out in so many different places. We have social workers, I think, have a lot of pride in what they do, and we really enjoy the kind of work that we do for the most part. A lot of it is really hard and really challenging and not always rewarding, but when I'm teaching a 101 class, which is, basically intro to social work, we talk about, why do you want to be a social worker? What is it that interests you about it? And most people just say the same thing. It's, I want to help people. And helping people, I think, is not just in a job that you do, but it's also in your personality and what you do as a person. So I agree, it is a lifestyle.
Yeah, I think, Phil, you did a good job of identifying some of the wonderful things about being a social worker and some of the disadvantages that our field is more susceptible to burnout. So I think we need to be really familiar with those warning signs and be able to take those steps to head it off before we fall into a burnout situation.
It also occurs to me, Yvonne, that one of the things that Phil has said that really resonates with me is that one of the reasons I'm a social worker is because it matches my values, right? Mm. And one of my values is kind of along the lines of what Fran said, which is, really being grateful for the things that I have in my life. And so I think while social workers tend to, I think we do kind of get pulled into a place where that negativity bias raises its head because of the kinds of assessments and evaluations that we think, are necessary. There is also a strengths-based perspective to the profession that is very, very important. And I guess for me, self-care really is taking that strengths-based perspective and using it when you look in the mirror and finding ways to raise up or enhance, the good things that you have in your life, and being able to strengthen, whether it's your mind, your body, or your spirit, right? Strengthen those areas of your life so that you can continue to do that kind of strengths-based perspective.
Right. And of course, the strengths-based doesn't mean that you're not aware of and that you don't acknowledge the risks. It means that you also identify the resources and the ways you can problem solve and the ways that you can manage those risks in ways that do bring more gratitude, more satisfaction, more gratification into your life. So we've come almost to the end of our program. I want to just allow our panelists to have a couple of words in ending, if you would like to add something. And then I'm also going to share the slide, which has the link to the survey and the password. So before I do that, is there anything else, Phil, Fran, Monica, that you want to add?
I'll go ahead and just say, sort of attach the whole social work as a lifestyle piece too, is that, you go to social work school and it changes the way you think about the world. Now you start to see everything is interconnected in ways that other professions don't have to bother seeing. Your plumber doesn't have to look at the world this way. Your attorney doesn't have to look at the world this way. But we do, and that is a special burden, but it's also a special talent. And I'm very fond of saying social workers have special powers, superpowers, because we can see not just the person, but the person in their environment and the context of all the other systems that they interact with. And as we progress in our careers, we learn how to push levers in each of those systems. We learn how to influence change, whether it's individually as clinicians or for entire organizations as macro leaders and meso level social workers too. So fall back on that idea a little bit. What are my powers? What can I do? What can I influence? What can I control? That gives you a sense of your own strength that you've earned as you've made your way through this profession.
And I'd just like to say, end by saying thank you. Thank you for the work that you do. Thank you for the tenacity that you have and the wherewithal to have chosen this noble profession. And take care of yourself. Be safe, stay healthy, and try to appreciate what's important in your life, your friends, your family, your work, your health. All those things are important to us.
I don't think I have anything more to add, Yvonne. I think Phil and Fran hit it all out of the park. So thank you for tonight.
Okay. So I'm going to add my thank you while I post the next slide. So this is the link. You don't have to worry about copying it because you will be receiving a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, a resource page, and also the link to the survey and the password, which is going to be emailed to you by the Friends of the School of Social Work. So I want to thank everyone for spending time with us tonight, for your participation, for your questions. And yes, I'm grateful for this program and for all of you out there doing the work that you do. Thank you all.